Larry had founded EBMC, and so he said, "Oh, you must come," and I came, and I've been coming ever since. And this POC Sangha has been running for more than 12 years, like without missing a beat. So unique in the world, in the Dharma world and beyond, like a place where you can come and practice gift economics, right? That there's no barrier to entry, right? That we can take care of ourselves, we can practice mutual aid, we can practice the anti-capitalist things that we know are from our own communities, our own traditions, our own native traditions, our own cultural traditions. Like, we create access. So we support this amazing place where we can find teachings and we can find Kalyana Metta and friends on the journey. Like, we support this because it's important to us. So I just want to double down on what Blake shared. Like, EBMC, even though we're virtual, is still doing the work and they still need our support. And so whatever you can offer tonight in the Dana, right? This practice of noticing what it feels like to give, right? You don't give more than you can hold, right? You walk to the edge and then you take a couple steps back. Right, but we give because for those who can give more, we create more goodwill. We give more. And for those who give of our time and of our blessings and energy that's not necessarily financial, we soak that up. We give that freely. And I'm committed to expanding the Dharma and access, and part of that has to do with the way EBMC does it. So please, let's do what we can to support the center and myself and just this great thing that we've got going. Just a little more detail about who I am. Like, I do come from Chicago. I did enter the practice through the doorway of suffering. I teach in many places. What I did when I came off the retreat was I went deep into study. I did this program called Community Dharma that was at EBMC at the moment, and it was like really about deepening your practice and understanding the Eightfold Path and some of the key components foundational to the Dharma. I then did study, at Spirit Rock with the Community Dharma Leader teacher. And I just know that, like, even at Spirit Rock, EBMC was holding me down. My best friends, my colleagues, my confidants were all from EBMC. And it's just such a great place and to really like ground our practice, to be buoyed in these turbulent times. To be buoyed at EBMC is a great, wonderful practice. And that's who I am. I've been on the Leadership Sangha, the program team, the POC coordinator, the Alphabet coordinator. I've done a lot at EBMC, and so I can't say enough good things about it. So I wanted to talk a minute about why we practice. I start a lot of my talks here because it's such a curious, exploration. Why do you practice? I'm not going to ask you to answer for everyone, but just think to yourself, is your intention to awaken or reach enlightenment in this lifetime? Maybe yes, maybe no. But why do you show up? Why do you put your intention? Why do you put your effort? Why are you here tonight? Like, where is our practice? What does it serve? I have a few ideas, inspired by my own reality, right? So that, as I said, I came through the doorway of suffering, and many of us do, right? The Buddha said that the family is our first and deepest place of practice. So I was born into a family. My father passed away when I was 5, and I was raised, like, my father's family wasn't present. So I was raised in an all-white family. So I was the only person of color in an all-white family. And boy, do I have a lot of practice. There was a lot of conditioning and a lot of suffering for a young brown kid in the middle of a white family. And so I just acknowledge that the doorway of suffering for so many, is how we get here. The conditions in the world are difficult. Like, that was 1975. So I look at today and I'm like, the conditions continue to suffer, to be challenging. The suffering is plentiful. I can think of, the under-racialized capitalism. There's so much harm done, right? We're stepping into Black History Month, and I live for the TikToks and the Instagrams that are like celebrating creativity and joy and Black excellence. And there's all of this. And at the same time, I hold that there's there's very few resources being allocated to where they need to be put. Greed and capitalism is really driving harm into a place in our planet, into our communities, that is like causing such violent suffering. How do I hold it? So I'm aware of the suffering and the conditions that have created them. And so we're also aware of The practice is an invitation to reduce our suffering, both individually and collectively. That's why I come. That's why I practice. It reduces my suffering. I think about places where, we're being offered tools. If you're familiar with the Eightfold Path, right, there are like things that we can do. The first noble truth is that there is suffering. The second noble truth is that there is a cause of the suffering. The third noble truth is that there is an end to the suffering, be it momentarily or permanent. And then the fourth is that there's this Eightfold Path that we can follow. There's guidelines and posts that we can do. We can make our lives better to reduce the suffering for ourselves. And so we generate these practices together around concentration and compassion and forgiveness, and we work to create conditions that actually make us stronger, more resilient, make us better. One of the ways I've seen it is, I, from Chicago, I was very much of the mentality, like I was very reactive, right? Something hurt me, then I would hurt that. And someone yells at me, I yell at you. Like it was very like one for one. One of the first things I noticed when I started to practice more and meditate was that I was able to respond instead of react. I noticed that like between the thing that would happen, I felt like there was a little bit of a moment of expansion, like, oh, do I want to respond the same way? And sometimes I did, but sometimes I didn't. And what I noticed is my suffering started to reduce based on my reaction, right? So I think about other places around concentration or my work around forgiveness, right? It's often said that, forgiveness is a tool for ourselves, not always for the one we're forgiving. I've been in deep practice around forgiving experiences in my childhood with my father that have brought me a lot of reduction of my suffering. And all of those practices came from the Dharma. So these tools that we use to reduce suffering for ourselves and others, we cultivate practice to support the healing and well-being, right? How has your practice reduced your suffering? I bet we could go around the circle in the room and come up with a lot of great examples. What ways have you felt more grounded because of your Dharma practice? How have you healed? I'll tell you that my mindfulness has created more space in my thoughts, right? That I have tools now that are given to me that, in very difficult situations, I have used the Dharma to get out. And so I'll use the example of I was in a very dark and harmed place. I can think around when the day that, trigger warning around violence, the day that Fernando Castile was murdered, I went into a spiral and couldn't get out of bed. I called in Black to work and I was like, I don't have it. I can't show up. And, my friends would say, well, you've got this Dharma, aren't you ready for suffering? I'm like, it's not how it works. But it was the Dharma. It was the practice of Vedana, this noticing pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. It's a practice that allows you to kind of separate and create space between very difficult emotions in yourself. And I think of the practice that Gina and Larry offered me in that retreat. A lot of the suffering I was feeling was around the grief of the passing of my father. And it felt so dark and so harmful to touch into. I was afraid I would be overwhelmed by it. But Larry offered me this blue sky expansion practice, right? To notice that if you let a bull loose in a china shop, it does a lot of damage. If you let a bull loose in a large arena, it can kick and buck and nothing happens. So can you expand your awareness looking at the blue sky and thinking broadly? This a practice of bringing your concentration from, holding suffering and your thoughts and maybe painful memories. If it comes too much to bear, can you introduce the concentration on another content that feels more pleasant? And it's not either or, but you can do both. So these practices were given to me very early, and I am so grateful for them because I think about how I continue to look at, the teaching of the second arrow is very alive for me. The idea that the first arrow is the suffering, and the second arrow is the, for lack of a better word, the why me of it. What do we do to contribute to the perpetuator of suffering? Are we choosing the end of suffering? Or are we choosing more suffering? There are many ways that I was choosing my own suffering. And so all of these practices are just, they're holding me. And I'm so grateful for it. And I know if this is possible for me, that it's possible for you all. And it's possible for others. And so I think that the power of our practice doesn't only work for us, because as I heal and transform, so do the people around me. That we are so interconnected that our practice gets us not only closer to individual liberation, but to collective liberation. There's more possible when we are suffering less together. And to be on the journey and on the path together is such a gift. I really want to pause there and just acknowledge that the interrelatedness of our personal freedom and our collective freedom is the place that our practice will always benefit. You know, I think that the Bodhisattva prayer is the clearest explanation of it all. There's one interpretation of it that says, however innumerable the sentient beings are, I vow to save them all. However inexhaustible the defilements are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the dharmas are, I vow to master them all. Right? That we are a commitment to these very aspirational practices, and I'm in here with you, and I thank you for them. So I'm going to shift focus and talk about the Brahmaviharas, or the divine abodes, or sometimes referred to as the four immeasurable minds. They include loving kindness, or metta, compassion, or in the Pali, karuna, sympathetic joy, or known also as mudita in Pali, and equanimity, or upekkha. So I'm actually going to work backwards and start with equanimity. I want to read something from the Heart of the Buddha's Teachings. I think that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this book, and it's such a powerful time to be remembering his teachings, and there's very few of us that haven't been touched either directly or through the ripples of his amazing work, by a lot of his teachings. So starting with the fourth Brahmavihara is upekkha, which means equanimity, non-attachment, non-discrimination, even-mindedness, or letting go. You climb the mountain to be able to look over the whole situation, not bound by one side or the other. If love has attachment, discrimination, prejudice, or clinging in it, it's not true love. People who do not understand Buddhism sometimes think upekkha is indifference, but true equanimity is neither cold nor indifferent. If you have more than one child, they are all your children. Upekkha does not mean that you don't love. You love in a way that all of your children receive your love without discrimination. So this even-handedness, this buoyedness, not being swayed or having too much of a particular interpretation of things. You're open. You're not attached to things so tightly that you can't, you can steady yourself in the stream, not to be swept up in the delusions that are too much suffering or even too much joy. Really, I love this practice, and it's something I've been cultivating for years, but you might think to yourself, how do I experience joy or suffering and not be swept away beyond what's reasonable? The third Brahmavihara, or karuna, upekkha. The third is compassion, or karuna. So this aspect is known as karuna, is the intention and capacity to relieve and transform suffering and lighten sorrows. Karuna is usually translated as compassion, but that's not entirely correct. But to develop compassion on ourselves, we need to practice mindful breathing, deep listening, and deep looking. The Lotus Sutra describes the bodhisattva who practices looking with the eyes of compassion and listening deeply to the cries of the world. Compassion contains deep concern. You know the other person is suffering, and so you sit with her. You look and listen deeply to her, and to be able to touch her pain, you are in deep connection, deep communication, and along the way, that provides relief. The compassionate word, action, or thought can reduce another person's suffering and bring them joy. One word can give comfort and confidence to destroy doubt, or to help someone avoid a mistake, or reconcile a conflict, or open the door to liberation. One action can save a person's life or let him or her take advantage of a rare opportunity. One thought can do the same. Because thoughts always lead to words and actions, with compassion in our heart, every thought word, and deed can bring about a miracle. So these are the Brahmaviharas that we rest into. These are the practices that the Buddha said will bring us towards liberation. How are you practicing compassion? I'm aware that my compassion is greatest when I have taken care of myself. I'm able to extend to others more easily, more readily, when I have taken good care of myself. And so I invite you just to consider in your practice, like how might you develop a compassion that leads to offering that one word that brings comfort, or to be with somebody in suffering. So mudita is often translated as joy, the experience of joy, not just like having joy, but the experience of it. Sometimes they call it spontaneous joy. But bringing our awareness to the practice of like what happens when you hear a child laugh, or what happens when you are in the experience of joy, right? In our practice, cultivating that sensation and for ourselves and for others is really deep, deep teaching. When you're able to experience joy for someone else's benefit, or to see the joy in someone else's experience and experience that same sensation, it really is, it's really quite miraculous and miracle. It's a miracle to be able to experience that. And so I'll just read a little bit from the teachings around mudita. So this third element of true love is mudita, or joy. True love always brings joy to ourselves and to the one we love. If our love does not bring joy to both of us, it is not true love. Commentators explain that happiness relates to both body and mind, whereas joy relates to primarily mind. This example is often given. Someone traveling across the desert sees a stream of cool water and experiences joy. On drinking the water, they experience happiness. And so what are the ways that we bring our embodiment to this experience of joy to make it happiness? I think about the ways in which we are inundated through social media, through our culture today that really drives us towards rapid inputs. And how many times a day can you comb through and just notice we're experiencing joy? Our minds are kind of predetermined to notice for gaps or for suffering or for missing experiences. And it takes a practice and mindfulness to really come through and ground ourselves. Do you let your body experience joy? What was the last thing that made you laugh out loud spontaneously? Like, what was the thing that you read, or music you heard, or a friend that you talked to that just brought that sensation into your body? That is the Dharma. That is practice. I might ask you just now to take a moment and get grounded and just notice if you know where you can locate joy in your body. When you laugh, right? That spontaneous wanting to dance or sing. What does it feel like in your body? And can you give that some space? Can you breathe into that and sustain your attention in that kind of experience of joy or happiness, as Thich Nhat Hanh is referring to it? And can you hold that as your practice? This mudita, this experience of joy. And then all the way back to number 1, which is the first of the Brahmaviharas, which is known as Metta in Pali, or loving kindness. So loving kindness has a texture to it and so much practice. The Metta practice is deep. It is foundational to Theravada and Vipassana meditation. And so if you haven't participated in a Metta practice, I invite you to stay with us during the next component, because I'll be walking us through one. But it is a deep practice. I mean, there are so many people who use Metta as their primary practice. So in meditation, it's great to hold your concentration on your breath and have anchors and focus, but there's also a utility to bringing this Metta practice to the enjoyment, the experience, the embodiment of joy is the Dharma and is the practice. So just read a few words here. The intention or capacity to offer joy and happiness. To develop that capacity that we have to practice looking and listening deeply so that we know what to do and what not to do to make others happy. If you offer your beloved something that she does not need, that is not metta. Where's this section? We all have the seeds of love in us. We can develop this wonderful sense of energy, nurturing an unconditional love that does not expect anything in return. When we understand someone deeply, we even understand that someone has done us harm, we can't resist loving him or her. The Buddha has declared that the love that we share must not be named just mudita, but the Buddha of love. Like, what a powerful invitation. Like, the practice that can get so strong that you even bring this love towards people that have caused you harm. I'm not always there, I'll be honest, but I do think that it is aspirational. I do think that it is powerful. And I invite us to consider that the longer and deeper we practice, that these aspirational ideas that we could be offering loving intention to someone, even if they've caused us harm, like this is the practice that reduces the suffering. This creates the Brahmavihara that will bring our practice to fruition. So I've said a lot, and my intention was to offer a reflection on the interconnectedness of our beingness and how our practice contributes to individual and collective liberation. Also to point us towards the 4 Brahmaviharas or measurables, to both define them and kind of have a living example of them. The Buddha said that these practices would bring us on the path to awakening, and in community we find places to practice this together. So as we practice together, we make good effort in a way that is contributing to the liberation of ourselves and each other and all beings. So this, for me, is the quintessential joy of Black History Month. I was just sharing how much I really love this Sangha, and I'm deeply grateful for your practice. Thank you for showing up. I want to just say that I came tonight with the intention to share something that I hope was useful. I also understand that if my intention did not match my impact, that I want to be accountable to it. So I'll be hanging on the line a little bit longer if people want to offer me some feedback. And I just ask that if there was any way that I caused harm unintentionally in my words or my actions, I ask for your forgiveness. And similarly, if there was anything that you may have done or that caused me harm, I extend my forgiveness to you. And, just really, again, circling back to share how deep the Brahmavihara practice can be for all of us. I hope that something I shared tonight sparked, was a catalyst for some more practice. I often am known as the teacher who wants you just to turn the heat up a little bit on your practice, and I hope that worked tonight. So you'll find a posture that feels comfortable and also like relaxed, but also alert in there. We might take a couple breaths together, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Another breath in and out. If it feels good, one last breath in and out. Take this moment to acknowledge our time together this evening, from our welcoming and our silent meditative practice, the conversation and deep Dharma teaching around the Brahmaviharas and the interconnectedness of our individual and collective liberation, to our metta practice and our connection and fellowship in small groups. Acknowledge that we have generated merit through our practice together tonight. That in our wholesome practice and our journey together in the Dharma, we have generated this great energy, and we take this moment to dedicate that energy and that merit. We dedicate our practice and any merit that we've generated through that to all beings. We generate and share this merit with people who are suffering. We share it with communities of color. We share our merit, the merit of our practice with each other, and to all beings in all directions. May all beings feel joy and ease. May all beings feel safe, healthy, and protected. May all beings feel strong, and may all beings be free. Thank you so much for your practice.